Hi guys, welcome to the channel. In today's video, we will be starting with part 1 of a stylized bust sculpt. This first part, we will begin by sculpting a rough skull and body. Then in part 2, we will add in the eyes, nose, ears, and mouth. In part 3, we'll sculpt some stylized hair. And then in part 4, we'll do some vertex painting and simple lighting. I've uploaded a couple of reference images to my Dropbox in case you wanted a rough guide as well. Okay, let's jump in. Very quickly before we start, I'd just like to mention I do make use of a built-in Blender add-on called Extra Objects, which you can enable in the Edit Preferences menu. This gives the rounded cube and single vertex options under the Add Mesh menu. I also have Align to View enabled for new objects under the Editing menu. Don't forget to save your preferences after making changes. If you wanted to add in the reference images from Dropbox, press 1 on the numpad for front orthographic view, then Shift A and select Image Reference. Select the front view reference image. I'm going to scale it up a bit. You can press S and then hold Control for an incremental scale. Here I hold it until the scale factor in the top left snaps to an even 11. Most blokes are scaling to 10, but this one goes to 11. Then 3 on the numpad for side orthographic view, Shift A, Image, Reference, then S to scale while holding Control until the factor in the top left matches that of the factor from the front image. Now rotating to perspective view, I'm going to press G, then X on the side image and move it to the side, and then G, then Y on the front image to move it back. Now when you're sculpting, you can use these images as a rough guide for shaping and placement like this if you wanted. Okay, getting started with the head. 1 on the numpad for front view, then I'm going to press Shift A, Mesh, and then to the round cube option. This menu will pop up in the bottom left corner where you can adjust the radius to 1 and then arc divisions to 16. If you don't see it right away, you should be able to see something that you can expand in the bottom left corner. Now I'm going to press Control Tab to pull up the Mode Pie menu and select Sculpt Mode. It should be on by default, but make sure you have X symmetry on up here in the top right. Then I'm going to select the Elastic Deform brush over on the left. Now let's push in the sides a little bit. You can press F to adjust the size of the brush quickly to give you different levels of control over the brush. 3 on the numpad for side view. And then let's push in the top and the left side like this to start forming the shape of the skull. Then let's pull the bottom left corner down to start forming the chin and lower jaw. Okay, numpad 1 for front view, and let's start giving more of a point to the chin like this. Okay, so at this point, I want a little bit more control over the sculpt, and you can achieve this by adjusting the voxel size under the Remesh menu here. I'm just going to remesh at the default voxel size of 0.1. Now hold Shift to smooth out the sculpt a bit more and subtly shape the head. Now the head is still looking kind of pixelated, and that's because the voxel size isn't small enough. The voxel or polygons are too big to give enough detail and control in the sculpt right now. If you're in Blender version 2.9, you can press Shift R to adjust the voxel size a little bit quicker like this. Here I'm going to make it something like 0.5, then press Ctrl R to perform the voxel remesh. You can see in the bottom right corner the poly count goes up a bit, and that's because the smaller the voxel size, the higher the resolution of your model. Now with the higher resolution, when I hold Shift to smooth, the model looks a lot smoother than before. Okay, numpad 1 for front view again, then up to the Sculpt Draw brush. Now I'm going to hold Control to invert the brush and dig out some eye sockets. You can see inside the eye socket the faces are getting a little bit stretched, which isn't the best, so I'm going to press Ctrl R to remesh the model at the voxel size we set earlier and clean up the geometry a bit. Still looks a little bit too blocky and pixelated for me, so I'm going to press Shift R to lower the voxel size a bit more, and then Control R to remesh again. And that looks a little bit better. Okay, now let's move over to the clay strips brush and start building up the brow above the eye. Back up to the Sculpt Draw brush and holding Control, let's dig out the hole for the nasal cavity behind the nose. Again, things are looking a little stretched out, so let's Control R to remesh and clean up that stretch geometry. Back to the clay strips brush and holding Control to invert it, let's flatten out the side of the skull like this, and then hold Shift to smooth. Now staying with the clay strips brush, let's move down and build up the cheekbones like this, moving towards the ear. Hold Control to invert and dig out a bit beside the nose. Then some more smoothing. Back up to the top of the head, let's lay down some geometry here. Now with the elastic deform brush again, I'm going to pull the cheekbones back a bit. And then I'm going to pull out the bridge of the nose like this, creating a kind of sharp point at the top of the nasal cavity we created earlier. Now I'm going to speed up the video a bit here as we will just make some smaller adjustments for the next few minutes. With the inverted clay strips brush, I'm going to dig out beside the nose and around the bottom of the cheekbone. Let's pull down the brow a bit to flatten it out above the eye. Some more minor adjustments to the cheekbone like this. Now back to the forehead. Let's dig out a bit like this. Back to the cheekbone, adding some more geometry back towards where we will put the ear. Now inverted clay strips brush to dig out the hollow of the cheek and accentuate the cylinder that will be the mouth. Then clay strips brush to add in a chin. Some clay strips brush along the jawline to accentuate it a little bit, then pull it out a bit to give it a slightly sharper angular look. Now invert the clay strips brush and dig out a bit behind the head and the corner where the jaw meets the skull. Now back to the nose bridge, invert the clay strips brush to create some more angles here. And then some clay strips brush over the mouth area to accentuate the round nature of the mouth. Okay, that's good for the head for now. Let's move on to the neck and chest. 7 on the numpad for top view, then Shift A, add a rounded cube. I'm going to use the operator preset called Capsule for the neck. It doesn't look too different from this angle, but 1 on the numpad for front view, and you can see it creates a longer pill shape, which is perfect for what we need. I'm going to tab into edit mode and then press Alt-Z to toggle X-ray mode. You can toggle it up here as well with this button. Then I'll box select the vertices on the top and then G to move them down. Now back into object mode and then R to rotate into place. Tabbing into edit mode, and with the top vertices selected, press S to scale and give the neck a little bit of a sloping shape. Now to make sculpting a little bit easier, let's join the neck to the head and make it one piece. To do this, it's quite easy. Just shift select both objects and then press Ctrl J to join them. Now they are one selectable object. Tabbing into sculpt mode, we can see though that the two objects are different colors. This is because they are at different resolutions or different voxel sizes. So let's press Shift R and lower the voxel size a bit, and then press Ctrl R to perform the voxel remesh. Now everything is one color as it's now one uniform voxel size. We have some jagged artifacts where the two objects overlap though, and to fix this, you can just hold Shift on any brush you have selected to smooth it all out. Now use the clay strips brush underneath to create a channel for the throat. Some crease brush to accentuate the jawline a little bit more. Then now some clay strips brush to start on the top of the trapezius as it joins up with the head. Here it's looking a little bit bulbous on the side of the neck, so I'm going to flatten it out by inverting the clay strips brush. Okay, good enough for now. Let's add in the chest. Shift A for a rounded cube with radius 1 and 16 arc divisions. Moving it to just the bottom of the neck here, and then back into sculpt mode with the deform brush. I'm going to start pulling it out to the side to form the shoulders and down to form the chest, kind of creating a triangular shape from the front. From the side, I'm going to pull down from the front part so we have a slope running down from the nape of the neck to the top of the chest. Then pulling the shoulders back a bit. Okay, so that's a decent start. Let's join the chest up to the neck and head. Same as before, shift select the chest and then the head, then press Ctrl J to join them. Shift R to lower the voxel size a bit, and then Ctrl R to perform the voxel remesh, then holding Shift to smooth over the creases. Now here I start in with an inverted clay strips brush on the side of the neck here to make a little bit of room for the sternocleidomastoid muscle, the large muscle at the front of the neck. Okay, so with a little bit more room there, let's now start laying down the bony landmark for the collarbone, starting at the top of the chest here, then straight out to the side, turn a corner a bit towards the edge, and then finish at the top of the shoulder, then back around towards the spine. Now starting from the end of the collarbone here, I'm going to go straight up towards the back of the ear in front view with the clay strips brush. Turns out I didn't leave enough space for this muscle, so I'm going to use the deform brush here to tuck it in a little bit more underneath the jaw. Now some more smoothing and then some crease brush to accentuate the muscle a little bit more. Now clay strips brush for the Adam's apple. And then invert it to create a little well in the space between the collarbone. Okay, now onto the trapezius muscle. Let's use the clay strips brush to roughen a triangular shape like this towards the shoulder. And then inverting the brush to flatten out the space between the trapezius and the collarbone, as mine is looking a little too rounded for my liking. Now onto the chest. The pecs are made up of 4 or 5 long horizontal bands that kind of run towards the armpit like this. Some crease brush in between to accentuate the pecs a little bit. Now onto the shoulders. Similar to the pecs, they are made up of 4 or 5 vertical bands of muscle that run towards the armpit as well. Then a triangular muscle like this as well on the back. Now some inverted clay strips brush to outline the shoulder blades. Then some more smoothing. Some crease brush to start on the spine. Then some clay strips brush in a dotted fashion like this to emulate the vertebrae. So there you have it, one way to start off a stylized bust sculpt. In the next video, we'll add in the eyes, ears, nose, and mouth to end up with something like this. Give me a shout on social media and show me what you're coming up with. I love seeing it. I have a little Facebook group going now too, which makes sharing a little bit easier. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. I hope it helped, and see you in the next one.